Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. So, if you've been following the news, not like CNN news, but the real news and what's happening, especially what's been trending on Twitter and social media where it's not being restricted, you can see that the dam that's been holding back the information about how Hollywood and the entertainment industry and the music industry is being run, that dam is breaking. And what we're seeing now is multiple stories exposing not just pedophilia and corruption and blackmail, but child sacrifice. People talking about what's happening at Bohemian Grove, a famous boxer coming out saying he was forced to watch children being sacrificed at Bohemian Grove. We're seeing a flood of information come out. And so joining us today to make sense of this and make sense of a much bigger picture of really the battle for Earth and who's really in charge and who's fighting who is my good friend Mel K. So folks, please enjoy the interview. Mel, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you just for doing what you're doing. It's great to have you.
Well, right back at you. And it's always a pleasure and an honor to be on with you. You are one of my favorite people, and your show is absolutely one of the best. So I appreciate being here.
Thank you. Thank you. So, as usual, there's about a billion things that we can talk about. I'm sure we'll touch on a lot of things, but um, the one thing that I'm seeing is that I know that you've been exposing pedophilia and the blackmail and the child sex trafficking and just that whole messy, dark underworld for quite some time. And having worked in Hollywood and coming out and speaking out against it, I think it was one of the things that really propelled you as a truth seeker and someone that's willing to put your life on the line to expose these dark truths. And what I'm seeing right now, though, especially since Elon took over Twitter, and you can see things going viral that would never have been allowed to go viral before. There's a handful of different events that have recently happened that, to me, show that a lot of the world is now waking up to these things that used to be only discussed in conspiracy theory circles. And we've got a handful of things that we can pull up today. One being, Quiet on the Set, this little mini documentary series exposing a lot of the abuse at Nickelodeon. You've got Ryan Garcia, right? The boxer coming out saying and going on a lot of these Twitter tirades, which we'll talk about that, talking about Bohemian Grove and being forced to watch child sacrifice. And it's pretty crazy. But I wanted to see from your perspective, having followed this for so long, what do you see happening with the narrative of this right now?
Well, I think that what is most pushing this is the people were popped out of denial that this is real, that this is real stuff. I talk a lot about how in the mid 2000s, what was very covert when it came to child exploitation and the sexualization of children became very, very overt in Hollywood itself. Way before it bled into culture and into film, TV, movies. And I think as people have watched the LGBTQ plus pushing forward, pushing the boundaries in schools, in all the way from kindergarten, sometimes before the obvious discussions out there on the front lines of parents wondering and asking and questioning and showing up and saying, this is not what we want for our children. This is not okay. The undeniable influence of Planned Parenthood, and not just Planned Parenthood, but being in all our schools, but the pushing of the transgender drugs, a lot of them coming through that organization. And I think people are just really seeing this push towards normalization of something that should be not just criminal, but shunned and taboo. I mean, we have even people that have public office, like Scott Wiener in San Francisco, and Katie Porter, and other people that are actually elected officials trying to make things lenient, or judges giving out lenient sentences all the way up to a Supreme Court justice. So I think people are now having to deal with their own conscience and their own reality, and it's in their face. And either they can look away or they can start to pay attention. And I'm glad I have talked about Nickelodeon and what Dan Schneider, and for at least 15 years, and I knew about that situation when I was there. And And like I said, I had a few really hard years in LA, and I met a lot of people through recovery there, and many of them are victims as children, child actors. Most you would never know because it was a unhealthy and very sad bargain. A lot of these child actors made. Very famous people too went through the ringer, both in music industry and in Hollywood, especially child actors. So I'm glad it's being exposed. It's never too late, but there are hundreds of victims. This new documentary, Quiet on the Set, is focusing on a couple, but I will tell you there are hundreds, if not thousands, and many of them, are not alive or succumbed to alcohol and drug addiction and suicide. It is a very, very ugly underbelly. And when I first started doing shows, long before the Mel K show or anything like that, it was really because I saw in my own life showing up at places where I was invited at a big director's house and Mulholland or wherever else, and there's a lot of young kids there under 15 often, and they're there in groups or not, drinking and hanging out, and people that should know better either not saying anything or whispering like, where are these kids' parents? And it became pretty normal, even at clubs in LA. So this is not new, and I'm glad that it's being addressed, but it's well overdue.
So there's a handful of places my mind goes, but one of the big ones is just why, like in terms of what's behind it, right? Is it is it that these pedophiles that are preying on young children, just like, do they choose these careers because it gets them close? It's kind of like, someone that's a professional clown. Maybe they're more likely to be a
Right.
pedophile because they're like choosing a career. It puts them in close contact. Not to offend if we have any professional clowns in the audience. I'm not calling you out. I'm just saying that you can think of these as more creepy. So is it that, or is it much more aligned to some sort of power and control structure, like, in understanding that that Hollywood, yeah, as, Breitbart talked about, Andrew Breitbart, how
Yeah.
politics is downstream from culture. Culture determines so much, and a lot of our culture comes out of the music industry and comes out of Hollywood. And so anybody that gains fame and notoriety has the ability to influence culture, which is a threat, or it's a tool, for the deep state. And so how do you see the role of pedophilia? Why is it so common in Hollywood, in the music industry?
Well, I think it's twofold, or maybe threefold, but certainly twofold. One being that it is used for blackmail. I believe that it is used for blackmail on a grand scale, and not just in Hollywood, but in powerful circles all over the world. Certainly, I think both in Wall Street and DC and Hollywood as well. B, there is a element in Hollywood that is truly lives as if they are disciples of Aleister Crowley, and it has been very normalized to be in types of cults and other groups. Especially there are actual satanic groups, witches groups of people that you would know, and there's a belonging. There's a you need to be a part of it, and once you're a part of it, you need to, like anyone that was in a fraternity or sorority, think about it on steroids. And you got to do these kind of rituals that, make you to prove your loyalty or to prove something else. And then at the top, there are a lot of sexual deviants, quite honestly. And at some point, you keep pushing the envelope. And I think a lot of those people do rise to power. I also believe that a lot of what we're seeing are people that are abused themselves becoming abusers there. And that does also have a hierarchy of it too, of I know what you've done, you know what I've done, let's make sure we keep it in the club. So I mean, multiple things like that. And then there really is a side of it that is I would say a tool to, and this is about children especially, a tool to where the parents oftentimes that are pushing children to be celebrities for whatever reason of themselves look the other way, and have also, I'm not, there are some parents that I do think are complicit, but there is a sense of that, it's not your child anymore if you've sent them to Hollywood. So, just kind of deal with what you have to deal with. Another thing that has not been talked about much in the press at all, that is coming out right now, is the decades long Puff Daddy situation that has been going on for a very long time, which I believe encompassed a lot of young actors. There was also, I think his name was Rothstein, but the guy that was behind Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. So this is not, this is really prevalent, and it's really very scary. And it is not covert in LA. It's not. And that's the other thing. It's become accepted. And I do think that some people, this is very sad. I lived it myself, but there are people that will do anything for fame. And sometimes that includes that. There are some very famous actors that I know were terribly abused. And then now they're movie stars. Some of them are movie stars. So it is disheartening to see some of those people not be on the forefront fighting this. But I do understand, a lot of it is predators becoming predators.
And you mentioned, Puff Daddy, which there's a lot coming out, about him right now. Like, so it seems like, from what I'm seeing at least, that in some ways he was the Epstein of the music industry, especially the rap industry. And I've heard, come across multiple stories from different sources of people talking about, when they get to that place, they have these young up and coming rap stars that
Yep.
they bring in, they groom them, and when it's time for the contract, basically they go in there and they've got these key figures, whether it's, Puff Daddy or some of the, big name producers that everyone knows about, that before that contract is signed, it's basically like you get to go into the back room, or you're on the producer's couch basically, and they sodomize them. Who knows what else happens, but it's part of them entering in. And you look at people like Lil Nas, right, who's, arguably one of the most famous rappers of the past, say, 5 years or whatever, era. Not sure. I don't really follow him closely, but you can see that he's not just, openly gay, but what he's promoting, his music videos, it's sex with a male Satan. I mean, it's
Yeah.
dark, evil stuff, and it makes me think that it's not just they're looking and say, "Hey, let's be edgy and trendy," but there's something much deeper. I mean, you mentioned Aleister Crowley and the Satanism. I mean, it's like there's a very, very dark force, that has taken over Hollywood and the music industry a long time ago, and it's
Yeah.
extremely evil. And it's not just evil of, like, they'll steal and cheat and lie, but it's evil, like, going back into, like, the biblical times of sacrificing children and Moloch and Baal. Like, it's that kind of evil that seems to be dominating.
Yeah, it's selling your soul, on a very, very real level. And I've said for years, because the whole Me Too movement was totally hijacked from the original people that really were victims, and the victims of the Me Too movement are not famous women that won Oscars, but that was hijacked, run out of CAA as well. So, there is an idea that they really didn't want people to look at the kid children part or the men. That was another thing too, because to me, in my experience, and I went there very young, I started in the business very young. So what I always believed was that the boys were in more danger than the girls. At least a lot of young girls got abused, don't get me wrong. But it was also a level of shame and control, and when it's a boy, and a boy that is not gay. Okay, so what I'm talking about is something else. It is a control, and a lifelong control, because that secret is so powerful, and so, um and when that gets out, or if the threat of it getting out is so scary and so controlling. A lot of a couple people that I know, a very, very famous musician that ended up overdosing. um
Folks, how do you feel? Me, I feel great. And one of the reasons I believe I feel better is because I take Balance of Nature's fruits and veggies in a capsule. They have an amazing story how this product was developed by Dr. Douglas Howard. It's right there on their website. Balance of Nature receives over 1,000 success stories every single month. They have hundreds of thousands of customers who've purchased billions of capsules of their fruits and veggies over the past 20 years. You should check it all out on their website. Their products are gluten free and non GMO, and they contain no added sugars or synthetics. I think if you're looking for something to make you feel better naturally, you should definitely give Balance of Nature a try. In fact, order today. Whether you order online or call them direct, you must use the promo code SETH, that's SETH, to get this special offer of 35% off plus $10 off any additional sets plus free shipping and the money back guarantee. So call them at 800-2468-751 and use discount code SETH, or order online at balanceofnature.com and use discount code SETH to get 35% off.
He was so terribly abused early on that and everyone knew it. It's just it's very sad. But what you're saying about the satanic side is that there is a ritual. I know of only two people that have actually told me to my face, but there is a part of it that does go back to that Aleister Crowley, sex magic. There's a lot of people with the OTO tattoos, especially in the rap world, and there's something about that some of these people believe that they get their power from Lucifer. I mean that God, our God, is the opposite, and their God, Lucifer, the God of light, requires things like stealing of souls through sex magic. I mean, it's crazy stuff to people that don't believe it, but what I am telling you is that there are people that actually do believe it, and they believe that their talent comes from that. And that's when it gets really crazy. And then you can trace the gurus. There was obviously, lots of people along the way that have talked about it, but it's very, very hard for people to understand and I lived it myself. I know many people that did not make. I'm lucky to be alive, but I know a lot of people that did not make it out of Hollywood. It is a severe predator prey, and the higher up you get, the worse it gets. So when I see people that look at, some of these giant actresses and actors, they don't really fully understand that there's like 20 people on their payroll, and everyone around them's job is to isolate them and control them. And it's just a very it is swimming with sharks for real. And the guys at the very top, there was a time, I think it was in the late 90s, when Michael Ovitz, who created CAA and then got kicked out basically, did an interview with Vanity Fair in the 90s, and he said that Hollywood had been taken over by the gay mafia. And everyone went nuts. And this is before anyone ever talked about this, and it ruined his career. And I mean, this guy ran Hollywood. And let me tell you something, if you don't understand how long this has been going on, just look at when he did that interview in Vanity Fair and what happened to his career after, to see how powerful the cover up is. Because the hardest part is the cover up side. If you do say something, the consequences are terrible, and they have been. Hopefully now maybe that's changing. And then the other thing is, most people understand that Epstein Island wasn't the only one. I think one of the big reasons I got kicked off very early on YouTube was because I kept talking about that there, not only do I know people, but that these people are going to get away with it because of the structure, the hierarchy there. That, a lot of what happens is, like I said, it's a blackmail Ponzi scheme. Basically, it's one after another, and then your goal, your job, maybe from the people above you, is to go do that to somebody else, and then get it on film, and like that ends up being a cycle, and then all these people are in on it, and the big goal is to make sure nobody breaks. And I mean, it feeds on it and feeds on it. It's very, very ugly. And I just really hope that people realize that feeding that beast is not something that they have to do, and that they should be very coherent. Because I do know from people that still work there, we're going to have a tremendous amount of propaganda coming at us purposefully to destroy our country even further and divide us more and encourage violence and normalizing, child abuse, sex abuse, all that. on purpose as part of the destruction of our country. So hopefully people will start to take this seriously and not continue to say, well, I'll still watch that, or I'll pay for that program, or watch that show, whatever. That's just entertainment. It's not about the people. No, it is about the people, and we really have to start acting like, the Oscars came up. It's funny. I went for years, and it was like, oh, it's Oscars time. I didn't even know the Oscars. So I think that people are getting it. But if you continue to feed the beast, and you know this, then you're participating, in my opinion.
And do you think that with, like I mentioned, these things now going viral on Twitter, which then makes it into the news cycle, because then it's like the mainstream media is they're forced to cover it, right? Like even Ryan Garcia, I'll pull him up really quickly here, right? So this is just obviously this is the sporting news. It's not mainstream media, but it probably is. I just don't follow sports. So but when you have these things happening and you have, like, let's say, like Ryan Garcia, and for folks who aren't familiar, he's a boxer, and he went on these tirades tweeting, talking about how he was taken to Bohemian Grove as a main part of it, of his experience, but how he was forced to watch child abuse and child sacrifice. I mean, and it just was just too much for him, and he broke, and he came forward, and he put us out there. When you have celebrities going viral talking about this, the mainstream media can't ignore it, because even people that are in a little bit of a bubble, they're still hearing about it. They're seeing it on Facebook. It's still getting spread around. And so, do you think that this represents a shift in the consciousness and the awareness of this? Because evil is most powerful when no one knows it's there, right? When it's hidden. Like, and that's my opinion, my understanding of it is to say,
I
like,
agree.
evil is strongest when no one knows it's around. And though it feels like now there's been this mass awakening and everyone's becoming much more aware of the evil, and it feels like, wow, the evil is very powerful because you see it. But I see it as they're losing power. Like the fact this stuff is now being spread around and everyone's looking at it and they're understanding it, they're losing it. So do you think that we're at a stage right now where this, the great awakening, as we've all talked about on these shows, that it really is happening, but actually it's having a significant impact on these power structures and their ability to operate because they can no longer operate in secrecy?
Yeah, I definitely think that. I also think people are more and more watching as people that cover up these crimes in the media end up committing these crimes and getting arrested for these crimes. And then you have to wonder, well, how did they get where they are? Like I'm saying, I do believe that a lot of this topic is about blackmail. And it's about blackmail and Papa blackmail, the main abuser abusing somebody, that person abusing somebody else. It goes on and on. But we have watched a lot of people that have made fun of this topic. I mean, the New York Times, Daily Beast, Politico, NBC, they acted like, what happened on ABC with Robach, hid the story on Epstein for 3 years. That producer, by the way, who was involved there, was also the producer on the January 6th committee. So there is also a reward structure involved in covering up these crimes. Everyone knows about, obviously Harvey Weinstein, a big Democratic donor at Buck. There were cases out there that they couldn't hide, and yet, they still ridicule. They do the old Saul Alinsky Media Matters. That person's crazy. That person's conspiracy theory until that person ends up being arrested or or charged with a crime as well. It seems like the go-to humiliators in the media when it comes to this topic end up being involved. Jim Caviezel was somebody who came out very early on. They tried to ruin his career. The damage done to that man. I was friends with him in the first few months of him coming out and talking about some of the things that he knew firsthand was terrible. I mean, I saw it firsthand, like in up close, and watching these media, disgusting media. They weren't saying, well, is this happening? And if this is happening, we need to get it out there, and we need to stop it. We need to find out who the perpetrators are. We need to put them away. No, it was the opposite. It was like, how dare you? When those people know, if I knew, they know. that it's real and it's happening and it's on a grand scale and it's a blackmail and control operation above all else. You would think that that would be, where we are. But yes, I do think that a big light's being shined on it and on many other things. One thing that I do see a lot of people also asking about is there have been hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements by JP Morgan and other places in the Epstein case, which is not about teenage girls that want to be in Victoria's Secret. It is also about children and actual, not the girls that you're picturing that they whitewash the thing with. I'm talking about very young children were very involved in that ring. And again, people are asking, well, where are the men? Where are the women? Where are the people that were involved? If they are admitting that they were involved in the crimes, or Maxwell going away and there being no Johns, it's this is where we are. Is I think not just in this realm, but in politics, in Hollywood, in Wall Street, people are asking, why isn't anyone ever held accountable? Why are none of these criminals? And it was amazing that Weinstein was, and that he never talked because he knows the everyone else involved. So you have to wonder. That's what I always think about the Weinstein case, and then the whitewash movie of it is, God, how scared Weinstein must have been to not flip, or maybe he wasn't allowed. And I think also, people are at a place where they want to see accountability across the board, including in this realm. And most people can put children ahead of all else. But the people out there that mock and ridicule and destroy lives for questioning these stories, those are the people everyone should be shining a light on. And I think they are now. And that's great.
And one thing that I think ties into this is just the overall surveillance state, because you have one of the key aspects of how this blackmail works is they get videos. Like, and those videos are
Oh, yeah.
probably, quadruple backed up. They probably have on the cloud somewhere. They've got them stored on hard copy somewhere. But this becomes their control mechanism is information. So you look at now just how easy it is for this information to be disseminated and to go viral. I mean, it's like if you're a politician and you get honeypotted, or say, I know China, the communists, the KGB, they've been doing this for decades. They
Oh,
mastered
yeah.
the art of using children, and you can go read about this, the history of how the KGB started using children as part of their blackmail operations. The CCP, absolutely. The Mossad, Israeli Special Forces, absolutely. I mean, the CIA, I know that you've interviewed, your good friends with Kathy O'Brien. I mean,
Yeah.
this is how, I mean, you take a step back from it, and this is how our world currently works. It's not how the world should work, but
Right.
it's actually how so much of this world works, that there's just these intricate networks and everything. And I remember, one time I was at an event earlier on, a couple of years back. I was at an event, like a patriotic event, and was talking to this guy. And this guy was very, very intelligent. He worked for, I think it was Microsoft, but he worked really high up at Microsoft because he had an ability with numbers that was very hard to replicate, especially financial analysis as it related to Microsoft as a company. And he was telling me the story. This is firsthand how he was being groomed and being groomed for like a very key executive position, and how at one point he was taken out to lunch with these two like very high level executives, and it's a nice lunch, and they start talking about pedophilia, like at this lunch with these two Microsoft executives, and he got really uncomfortable with it, and they're just kind of talking casually about it, like, yeah, like occasionally if you have a child, whatever. And he got really uncomfortable with it, and then he went back for, like, it was almost like an interview luncheon type thing. He went back a second time, and they started pushing it more, and I think he told them he was really uncomfortable with it, and he actually ended up leaving the company and going into exile, because once he left, they started tracking him. They knew where he was at. They were
Right.
showing him they knew where he was at. So it's not just okay. If you're Hollywood, you start off, you're in the Mickey Mouse Club and you get groomed, and then then you're Britney Spears or you're Christina Aguilera, whatever it is. It's actually, even I think these big companies,
Yeah.
Google,
I
Microsoft.
think big tech is certainly, it's certainly the same thing. But what was happening to your friend or this man you met was that they were testing him to see if they could trust him.
Folks, I have a quick message for you. Look, the 2024 election is do or die for the globalists and communists that have infiltrated our country and are currently running it. And they either have to win, or they're going to destroy America so nothing is left either way. And if you're the person that's watching this show and following this information, unfortunately, you have the weight on your shoulders of making sure that your family is prepared, especially as we head into this next year and this next election cycle, because unfortunately, I think it's going to get rough. And one of the ways I know they're going to target us is through our food supply. You can see all the food factories burned down. You can see the warnings of coming famines and food shortages and everything like that. And food is one of the number one ways totalitarian regimes have always used to control the population, is destroy the food supply. So if you don't have at least 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months worth of stored food, I highly recommend you take that very seriously because, look, as I mentioned, if you're the person that's watching this, you're the person that carries the burden of making sure your family is prepared. I would recommend at least 6 months, if not a year, of storable food. So if things go haywire, whether it's grid down or terrorist attack from what's coming across the border, that your family can safely stay in place and you can feed your family. So, folks, today, go to heavensharvest.com and make sure you get your storable food that'll last for up to 25 years. Just in case things go south, you know that you have what's going to take to feed your family, which is so, so critical for us to get through this next stage of history. So go to heavensharvest.com today, order your food that'll last up to 25 years, and use promo code Seth to save 15% on your entire order. Again, that's heavensharvest.com and use promo code Seth, SETH, to save 15% on your entire order.
Roseanne and I always laugh about how like they totally knew that we would tell because we knew what was going on. But there is and this is in all the cults, especially the Hollywood cults, is there is a evaluation process that looks like friendship or that looks like you're invited to something or come speak at this thing, but it's not that. It is a psychological evaluation that you don't even know, and it's really about, can we trust them with this? And that's probably what was happening to that guy. I know it's happened to many people. When I was very young in LA, there was a whole thing where people first of all, to people my age as a young girl, and this is around the time when the Paris Hilton sex tape and the Kim Kardashian sex tape, and I think that was also some kind of normalization operation as well of what was happening at Britney Spears at the time, Lindsay Lohan. That's when I was there. I was young. I was in that world. And I will tell you, it was like, if you are not willing to do this or that, don't even bother showing up to this audition. Don't do that. And it was kind of like, either you want to make it or you don't. It was just very. And then these girls were being exploited, and then you'd see them turn around and make a lot of money off of it, no matter how humiliating it might have been or not. At the time, they were normalizing it with these specific people that you were saying, well, if you want this, look at so. And that's on both sides. And the other thing that happens is when you go on a set, and this happens to a lot of young actresses and models, both men and women, especially models. So, there's like, oh, this is art, or this is art, or you signed a clause. Don't worry, we're not going to show anything. Well, what you don't know is that they're keeping that footage and they're keeping those pictures, and that will come back to haunt you. I went to Hollywood way before the internet, so that wasn't a thing. But now it's very, very, very dangerous. And um, any of those situations can and will be used against you to manipulate you going forward. There's a giant hack when I was there of people's phones and emails and content, and you really never know who you're dealing with. And I have a friend, Oodles Wallace, who's behind the Protect Act, because once your stuff is on the internet, there is almost nothing you can do. But that brings me to the surveillance state, because the predators, the powers that be, I call it the parent company that runs America, the public-private partnership above our government, would like to track and trace, surveil all of us. Well, one of the ways that they are doing that, and allowing and not doing it, how they're getting us to be okay with it, is by saying that there's proliferation of child porn, of child sexual exploitation, all of that on the internet. Of course, we know about Facebook and Instagram and all of that, but And even X allows porn even against your will. You have to really like go in there and fight. A woman I had on, it was like revenge porn, and it took them weeks. There was child porn, and the kid that was the victim trying to get it off. It took months. So I know all over Pornhub there's child abuse, rape, all kinds of stuff. It's very hard once it's put on the internet, and now it can be totally manipulated. It was always manipulated when it was real, like CGI and whatever. But now it can be, and the powers that be, the big spying agencies in our government, NSA, DHS, all these, they're saying that in order to protect children from being exploited online or child porn, or that then they need to, now every website has to be succumb to having the ability for Apple or Microsoft or whatever to be able to scan all your videos and all of your pictures and all of that. And there's a lot of things being put in, especially in the unholy alliance between big tech, majorly Meta, Google, Alphabet, X, Twitter. I don't know if Elon Musk has pulled out of this yet. And Apple, Microsoft, that they all have an agreement with DHS and with the Department of Justice, National Security Division, and all of that. That is totally skipping warrants. That is totally the government's also buying your data from data brokers, from the cars, from the video games, from all of this. We are all fully surveilled right now. But in one of the many ways, just like the Patriot Act was proposed and passed, though unconstitutional as can be, is because they were telling us, well, there's a threat of a terrorist. So if you have nothing to hide, it's fine. Well, now, because I think this is becoming mainstream, they're using this to get you to agree that anything that you put online, any website, your phones, that they have free reign to be able to break in without a warrant and scan your content for child porn. When it's probably, they already know who's really doing that. This is just another tool to surveil us. So there's a slippery slope there that needs to be addressed. But I do see them using the wide acceptance that we have a very big child sex trafficking and child pornography, child exploitation problem, not just in America, but in the world. But America apparently is the worst. But that they are using that for their own means also. That is very nefarious, in my opinion.
Which is just so crazy. It's like the Hegelian dialectic, just kind of
Exactly.
exponential. It's right. They create the problem. There's a reaction to it. Then they bring out the solution. Whereas here, like they are the problem. Like they're a bunch of pedophiles and they're raping young kids and they're sharing porn of them, and it's this giant blackmail structure. The public finds out about it and starts getting up in
Right.
arms about it, and then they say, "Oh, okay, well now we're going to conveniently use this to push more laws and more legislation to allow us
Right.
to surveil you even more." Though they're the same ones that are allowing this to happen, and they're the same ones that are actually partaking in it. I mean, it's just this disgusting cycle of like they create this problem. There's a reaction. You think there's a solution, but the solution actually makes the problem even worse. And then it just keeps. I mean, it's kind of like where do we
That
end
goes
up at,
back to
right?
that goes back to your original question. Because what we're also seeing, there's a bunch of PR campaigns going on right now to disclose stuff to people. I see it happening with the CIA. They're allowing them to expose what happened before Crossfire Hurricane with Brennan. They're exposing that they had 12 installations since 2009 in Ukraine, the CIA. So there's some kind of operation to normalize or allow or throw under the bus, or we're going to reform it, or whatever is going on there. But maybe also it's this too, allowing this to go mainstream, for people to talk about it, for people to be out there, for mainstream media to pick up on it. It is what you're saying is also part of it. Well, we'll use that and they know that there's a big movement. Sound of Freedom came out, of course, people started to talk about it, but then the complaints about it were, well, it's the worst in America. So why we don't want people to think, well, that happens in Guatemala or that happens there, but it's being sold to Americans or in the UK or one of the Five Eyes nations. Those Five Eyes nations are the worst on spying on citizens without warrants and stuff too. So like you said, it's a real um, problem, reaction, solution that is being manipulated. And again, people have to realize the end goal of a lot of this global governance, Great Reset, Agenda 2030 plan is that there is absolutely zero privacy at all. So, I mean, that is the goal, especially of SDG 16. So, identity from birth to death, which is a digital track and trace surveillance apparatus that is your digital ID, but digital everything on that one ID, very similar to the model that Schmidt and them helped build in China. So then you think on that level, well, will the high level child abusers be exempt from this? I would say that they're probably the ones creating it. So, we really have to be very cognizant of what they are using to manipulate us and stop looking at their solutions as the solutions and start coming up with our own solutions. And one of them is sharing it and doing shows like this and not being afraid, because I'll tell you what, when I started talking about this, people would rather literally do anything than acknowledge that this was real, and when it was in front of their faces. Being at somewhere in LA at 2, 3 in the morning and being like, why are there 4 young boys that are like 12 here with this guy? What is going on? I mean, and it was very, I also think that we watched that whole Michael Jackson thing, and a part of me thinks that that was look over here, while all of us that are, pretending that we're horrified or making videos or, or making documentaries or whatever, we're kind of like, okay, we took care of the pedophile. Now we can move forward. It just seems like we're continuously manipulated by, I believe, a very small group of people, and like on a grand scale. And we have to start coming up with our own solutions, because their solutions that they're giving us likely are to benefit them.
And okay, 2 questions. I'll ask my first one, then I'll let you answer, then I'll go to the second one. You mentioned a small group of people, right? And that's, to me, there's so much discussion about who are these people. And, like I did a show recently, I interviewed with Tiffany Meyer from the Epoch Times, this new documentary that she has about, it's called, I think, Hollywood, Takeover, which is about the CCP's control and influence over
Yes.
Hollywood. And it was interesting because it was really well received, but a lot of comments were actually saying, "Oh, you're pushing the CCP psyop. It's actually the Jews, and anything but that is just a red herring, and Seth, you're just towing the line, and you're part of the disinformation." And it's like I've studied the CCP extensively, and I mean, yeah, okay, you could argue that yes, Mao got his funding through a lot of the bankers, and through Yale and China, and okay, some of the earlier things that kind of got communism started, and a lot of communism's growth came, yes, from America, from the investments from America, et cetera. But it doesn't mean that they can't be Frankenstein's monster. It doesn't mean that they can't be started by some sort of group and they've grown out of control. But and I think that people, that they take it very black and white. It's like, no, no, no. It's this
Right.
one group of people that control everything, and they're behind every single problem in our society. Uh, so I want to see, what is your perspective on that? Because you're someone that I've talked to that you seem very well rounded in your understanding of how these things work. And it's not so black and white. So when you say
Yeah.
they or the small group of people, what does that look
Yeah.
like for you?
Well, to me, it looks like what I do in a lot of my presentations. I call these people out. I believe that it's a public private partnership of multinational corporation heads, and what I call the international banking cartel, and the Davos crew. Which here's the hard part about where we are right now, and it is very um, by design. Look, I have big problems, especially with a group called the Mega Group, and Les Wexner, obviously being Jeffrey Epstein's main, and that he's still out there, and Bill Clinton's never been questioned. These are problems I have. But look, again, I get called anti-Semitic a lot, and it's like I'm telling you the truth from history about certain things, and you have to be open to, oh, because it's one thing or another. What I believe we are dealing with now, and this is just from all my work, and my biggest thing is I follow the money. and the money goes all the way to the Bank of International Settlements. There's something wrong in Switzerland on multiple levels, and that seems to be the tip of the iceberg. So that is a totally opaque, uh, the bank of banks. All of our Federal Reserve banks go there for closed door meetings where you don't know who's there. There's not let out, including Jerome Powell. All the bankers from all over the world. For some reason, it has sovereign immunity and almost the exact same model that the Vatican has of being a vassal, untouchable, very dark place. I do not understand why the rest of the world is allowing this to continue. And I think that that has a lot to do with it. When I talk about the international banking cartel, that would be the top. Under that would be the IMF, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization. Something is very unholy about these groups and their power and who's wielding that power. It is not clear who wields the power at the very top of the financial banking cartel.
Folks, perhaps you'd agree with me when I say that over the past 5 years, the mainstream healthcare system's credibility has plummeted. Alternative healthcare systems that aren't beholden to medical consensus or big pharma are on the rise. Sweetamine is time tested and proven to boost your life with better health. It's one of the leading products that helps with inflammation and daily aches and pains. Just because you get older, it doesn't mean that you have to feel old. And folks, did you know that most of the diseases that make people sick and die these days are rooted in chronic inflammation, oftentimes due to glycine deficiency? So, sweetamine is composed mainly of the amino acid glycine, the nutrient that the immune system uses to regulate inflammation. So, with once daily sweetamine, most people feel the reduction in pain after just a few days. So, I challenge you to the 12-day sweetamine challenge to fight inflammation and take control of your health today. So, folks, buy sweetamine online at sweetamine.com or call 855-GET-SWEET. That's 855-438-7933. And make sure you use promo code SETH, SETH, to get a nice discount on your purchase.
On the other side, you got the globalist organizations, all basically started between the Crown and Rockefeller, the current ones, that's the tentacles of the UN, who all seem to be in on that. The hard part of all of this is that I believe we are at a very unique place that is described in 1984 when the state is being described as it is now. And in that quote about the state, the person representing the state that's explaining it to Winston is saying that it's that the Nazis and the Bolsheviks were basically amateurs, and is explaining that we want power for power's sake. There is no, that we're not. This isn't about somebody winning. So to me, and I did study because of a screenplay I wrote 20 years ago, very much the 1930s Germany, really in depth, and I understand the 30s and 40s in Germany. So what I believe is that we're dealing with something I call the Fourth Reich. And the hard part about nailing down who these people are is that they have no allegiance to any nation. They have no allegiance to any flag, any people, any religion. They have no allegiance to any to humanity at all itself. And frankly, they meet at conferences all over the world. You can trace who goes to these conferences, be it Bilderberg or Davos or wherever else. And if you keep cross-referencing, you're going to see the same people happen to go to all of these, and that they represent every nation. That there is not a nation or a religion or a nationality or any of that that is running this. There are people from the Muslim Brotherhood. There are people from the CCP. There are people that have one foot in Russia and one foot in Ukraine. There are people in North Korea. There are people in our whole, I call it the parent company, private-public partnership that has captured our government, except for the unconstitutional, shouldn't exist intel agency that appears to be working for them. But this is everywhere, Australia, Canada. So what I really believe has happened is that you can point to any one of these people, the CCP, the Jews, the UK, the Crown. I think most roads do lead to London, in my opinion, but or the city of London. But whatever the case may be, what we are dealing with now is an international, multinational, supra group of people that truly believe that they run planet Earth as basically a parent company of the world. And then they have their that parent company. Like when I started young, one of my first jobs was in advertising, and I worked at this company, Ogilvy. And when I was there, this company, WPP, bought Ogilvy. Well, they also bought, J. Walter Thompson and McCann Erickson and every other company. And so basically, no matter if we were pitching a $50 million account against the top other three agencies, at the end of the day, it was still going to be the same parent company that won or lost. And that parent company was usually in cahoots with the company of whatever we were pitching. So this is a very intricate, it's a multinational public-private partnership of people that consider themselves stakeholders on planet Earth. And if you start to look at it from there, and then you think, okay, well, let's map this out. There's some people that are very, very good at this out there. Ian Davis being one of them, Whitney Webb, another person. And once you start looking at it that way, then you realize the brilliance of not having a one nation look or one people. What I will tell you is that the biggest thing that all of these people agree on is that America cannot exist. Okay. And that is where we really have to go. You can do all you want. You can call me whatever you want in the comments everywhere. I am so shadow man and so censored. I am telling you right now, when Donald Trump says they're not after me, they're after you, I'm in the way. I'm telling you, this group of this parent company of planet Earth, America, they are not after America. They're after the world, and America is in the way. Our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, our DNA, the people aren't coming here from all over the world because we're not the best country. It's the opposite. And they want to destroy this. If they can destroy America, the rest of them won't be able to stand. But I will tell you right now, the scariest part when you dig in and you see the factions that are involved. So you see the Muslim Brotherhood and the International Banking Cartel. And then you see the Davos crew. And over here, you see the CCP. And then you see North Korea is not going to be left out. And then you see the other groups. You realize that if they did, God forbid, if they did achieve, and I think this is what's on the line, honestly, because I believe that both Bushes, Clinton, Obama, and Biden are all in on the global governance model. But I have to say, the hell on earth that would be unleashed on the rest of the planet and the rest of humanity if America was removed from the board. And then the Muslim Brotherhood's not going to say to the CCP, it's okay, you take care of it, you can be the lead. The CCP is not going to say that. The bankers are still going to want to control everything. They control everything else. So what we are dealing with is a megalomaniac, I think godless, they are God, group of people that have created a very tight-knit, entry only, probably including what we were talking about in the first half of the show. I certainly think Jeffrey Epstein worked for this group, and that there's multiple other people. And the thing that scares me the most is that I believe that they are creating a blockchain track and trace surveillance worldwide control grid that all of us to participate in society, and I mean all of us, will have to be on through Agenda 2030 and the 17 development goals. And all of this really ties together into this small, I mean, if I'm to build it out, I really do think this is about 20,000 people that when you talk about secret society, that they're the ultimate secret society. And you know what? They don't hide it. We do know who's involved in America, and nobody ever seems to go after these people. They just continue down well, Larry Fink's here again. He doesn't like the ESG score. He's going to change the name to inclusive capitalism. Well, what are you doing in Davos and CCP? And what is your goal with America, sir? I mean, it's just at this point, people can keep going around the circle of it's the Jews or it's the CCP or it's the crown or whatever. All I know is that we're all in danger, and it really doesn't matter who it is. It matters who it isn't. And who it isn't are patriots and people out there that are trying to expose it, because these are all, I think, little pieces of a bigger picture. And until we realize that we actually are all on the same team. I did a show the other day with somebody, Cynthia Chung, who was talking about Martin Luther King, because I'm saying I don't think America can make it unless we unite over freedom, liberty, privacy, and transparency as a nation. Forget all the divisions, because we are up against a very dangerous enemy that I believe that the people that have the parent company of our country are done with America. Their fortunes, their futures, their allegiance, their alliances are with Pan Am and this Fourth Reich I'm talking about. They do not see their fortunes, their futures, their their children, their grandchildren. They don't see the America anymore that we see. Okay, so they're functioning on that level. I believe that Barack Obama and Biden are both people to facilitate that final goal. Now, what we are walking into with the surveillance and everything we're talking about is a place where all of the people I'm talking about, they all have a stake in that Agenda 2030 surveillance model. If and when they ever, if the American people walk in eyes wide open as they are right now into this because we're fighting each other and not realizing that the stakes are America's sovereignty and us becoming a global cog in a wheel. If we do not see that, then we are going to walk into this and there will be no getting out of this digital gulag track and trace surveillance world that is going. And let me tell you something. What I'm talking about goes all the way up to the Bank of International Settlements. It is not American. So when you see the NSA has an agreement with the Five Eyes nations, and that includes the CIA and the DHS and the FBI and all of these groups that are, were turned into beasts, especially after the Patriot Act, and you look at all the people involved, you realize that it is already cross borders. It is already global. The Biden regime put in an executive order that led to a data court, that Eric Holder and James Baker are on. They're the judges of it, about exchanging personal data of people without warrants, of course, with the EU. So they have the EU already, and they have, the Five Eyes nations and us, where if any one of these people say that we are domestic terrorists or we are a threat to national security or anything else, they will open up a file on you because they already have one. So what we really have to understand is the big picture. Stop fighting about this group or that group. I don't care if you hate them. The truth is we are all equally in danger, but we are also the answer, because there are hundreds of millions, if not, billions of us that are awake. And I believe that worldwide. It's just, if we keep saying that it's the Jews or it's the Chinese or whatever, we're missing the point. It's all of them. It's all, it's really that much. It's that much bigger. And believe me, the Muslim Brotherhood is still playing a big part too. So they get a free pass. I don't know how. But again, and I believe that, and frankly, what I believe is that what's happening in Ukraine, in Israel, and in and apparently in Taiwan and all over Africa and Syria, I think it's the same group, the Fourth Reich, that is running all of these operations, because what they believe is order out of chaos, and chaos would be the whole world surrendering and saying enough. Just make it stop. We'll go on your blockchain. We'll give up all of our sovereignty. We will be a global governance world. You guys in Davos or wherever the heck you are meeting this week, fine. We're just going to live our lives, and you can watch and surveil and take all our privacy, all our property, everything you want, and just make it stop. And you know who makes it stop? We do. So I'm glad you asked that, because, if people don't understand that that's the answer, then we really are in much worse shape than we should be.
I agree. And unfortunately, I know you have another interview, so I can't spend about 20 minutes digging into just a small part of what you just said. We'll do that on
Well,
the
I can
next
take
show.
a little bit more for you to kind of react to that, because I went on my monologue, but I'm just so sick of these people fighting amongst themselves. And especially you and I've talked about it so many times. Whatever you believed even 3 years ago, I don't really care. What I do care, and I don't care if you were a degenerate gambler or you were a saint that hired 50,000 people and gave all your money to charity. We are in a redefining time right now. So, whatever you are doing, whatever your life has been to this day, you are living through an extraordinary time where you will have to answer someday to what you did when technology and totalitarianism meshed together and showed up at the front door of this country, because the door is open and people are walking right through it. And I just don't know anymore how everyone's fighting amongst themselves, especially people that claim to be patriots, attacking each other. You're so stupid.
Oh, it's
You're
crazy.
so dumb.
It's crazy, and you see it too. You see it, there's this
Yep.
massive infighting. It's gotten worse and worse and worse, and now you've got the pro-Trump, the anti-Trump, the pro this, the anti this, the pro wellness company, the anti wellness company. I mean, it's gotten so crazy, and it's the way that we, I think, used to look at it and say, "Gosh, look at the liberals, and they're so angry. They think all the problems are the conservatives, and they don't realize it's the global communists. And how, if we could all just get
Yeah.
together." And yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
And do you think, the one thing I've been thinking a lot lately as I watch CNN and MSNBC, MSNBC is total intel TV. If anyone thinks that thing is not run by the CIA, they are completely out of their minds. But all of these things, even the New York Times, but the View, these people hate their viewers. They fill their viewers with toxic hate and vitriol, and they know that they're lying, and they're not doing anything to help them or guide them towards empowering themselves about real problems that are really going on. And all I think is, God, NBC Universal, ABC, Disney, they hate their audience more than they hate us.
And they hate
I
America.
mean, it is really amazing. And I have to tell you, it is starting to really, like you're saying, all these groups, people have to understand they have to get rid of every group, and they have to go inside themselves, in their heart, in their mind. They want the misinformation, disinformation, all that. With Ketanji Jackson, do you think she wasn't put in there to end the Constitution, folks? I mean, the Constitution, whether you like it or hate it, they pulled Jon Stewart, one of their biggest mouthpieces, out of the woodwork to come in going up to the election. And one of his first shows, he says that we have to destroy the Constitution. It's the problem. So what you have to understand is that we, the people, really have to figure out how to stand together across the lines for the thing that we cannot lose, which is freedom. And that is on the ticket. I don't care about the Trump Biden nonsense at this point. I want people to really look at their senators and their Senate races, because those guys, the senators, are the ones that can stop these surveillance states, stop the fake fourth branch of government that's usurped all the others. The Senate can do a lot. There's a big problem in the Senate. So, there's so much we can do. And the one thing we shouldn't be doing is picking and choosing who the enemy is, when the enemy is really much bigger than you think. But again, much smaller as well. If you stop, trying to choose which side, there's many, many sides of it.
Very good points there. So I'm gonna put up your website. So what
Ah,
folks
thanks.
just experienced there is the Mel K show. It is the wisdom and the knowledge coming forth from you. Visit your website, themelkshow.com. You're on Rumble and Podbean and all different places you can listen to podcasts and watch
Yeah.
podcasts. I
Yeah, and
also
and honestly, I wanna thank you so much, because it's always a pleasure, and I wish we had more time, but I love checking in with you, and I'm gonna have you back on my show, because you do know a lot about the CCP, more than most people can even possibly imagine, and it is a big part of this puzzle. But we gotta be really proactive in being honest about where we are, and not continuing down the path we're on. And I think you're on the forefront of doing that. And I do wanna say to people too, at themelkshow.com, I've done a really, heavy lifting of putting together a resource page. And what I'm telling you right now is that so much is disappearing from the internet. Things that I would research even a year ago are gone. Lots of websites, you have to go to them directly. I put a lot of things on there I call opposition playbooks. I think they are very important. The one thing to fight propaganda is to go read their own words. You can't read those opposition playbooks and not clearly understand what we are dealing with. So I put them there. Many of them are unable to be found if you Google or anything else at this point. So I just really ask people, just go look around the melkshow.com, on the resource page, find what you're passionate about, and become an expert in that. And spend your time doing that. And then go out there and tell everyone in your world that we can all be Paul Revere, and we can all redefine ourselves as leaders and heroes right now in this extraordinary time. So thank you so much, Seth. Man in America is one of my favorite shows. I don't get to watch many shows, but we do watch yours, and that's because it always ends in a place where I still feel hopeful, but I do know I have a lot of work to do. So thank you so much.
thank you, Mel. It's a pleasure having you on. All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed that interview. I've now got a very important, about 30-minute update on the banking situation. So now even Jerome Powell is coming out and saying, folks, the banks are going to start collapsing. He's talking about it. He's in line with a massive, major real estate CEO that's saying the exact same thing. So they're now speaking openly about what's coming, which is what we've been warning you about. So, folks, please enjoy the interview with Dr. Kirk Elliott. Kirk, it's good to see you as usual. How's it going?
It's going great. It's so good to see you too.
Yeah, there's always updates. And I was at, when we first started doing weekly shows together, I thought, gosh, is there really going to be a weekly thing to focus on? But I feel like we could almost do twice a week or something. We'd still have so much content because it just seems like everything's compounding now and everything is speeding up, which I mean, look, this is an election year. There's a lot of really significant events that are unfolding. And I think that most people would agree that this isn't just a normal election year. And this is like, in a lot of ways, I'd say this is the time for Hail Marys from the deep state, because if the populist vote for Trump is enough to get him in and enough to overwhelm their systems and all of that, it spells a very big loss for them, right? So I think they're in desperation mode. And we, as you know, and I know, the economy and finance, everything controls it. It's like the underlying pulse of the entire world. That's why, folks like Martin Armstrong can predict wars based upon just looking at financial numbers. So understanding how finance plays into what's happening this year is really important. So let's, last, one of the more recent interviews we did, we talked about March 11th with the pullback of the emergency funding. We know that as we talked about, CNN saying, oh, I think New York Community Bank, people pulled out $7 or $8 billion. Like, oh, it's not a bank run. And it just seems like everything is kind of boiling and that they're trying so hard to keep it, keep the lid on, but they can only do that for so long. So what are you seeing on your end over the past week or so? What are some of the big stories that you're seeing unfolding?
There's so many. I mean, and you're right, boy. We could almost fill up a show every single day with all the economic news that's happening right now. But so the biggest story of the year financially, I think, is unfolding right underneath our nose, and it hasn't really happened yet. But that's FDIC running out of money. I think we are going to have bank failures on steroids that makes Silicon Valley Bank, Credit Suisse, First Republic, when that all happened last spring, it's going to make that look like child's play. I mean, that's really what I think. This is going to be the biggest financial story of the year. And here's the reason why. So first, you look at, why do banks fail? They simply have more withdrawals than they have deposits. They run out of capital, and the investments that they have aren't growing, right? Because banks invest in the same things you and I do, right? They invest in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate companies, except on a larger scale because they're working with other people's money. So when their investments are coming down, more withdrawals and deposits, they're going to run out of capital. So this is why you had those 5 banks that failed back in March, April of last year. So now, do we have the same thing going on now? Yep. But why did those bank failures stop? Everyone said, "Whoa, look what the Fed did. Fed's amazing. They stopped the bank runs." They didn't fix anything though. They put a Band-Aid on it, but there's still, for sake of illustration, a big, huge gaping wound underneath the Band-Aid. They never fixed that. All they did was put a Band-Aid on it by instituting the bank temp funding program, which was stimulus money to bail out failing banks to stop the bank runs, because they know if people lose confidence in the banks, they lose confidence in the whole financial system, right? So that's what that did. But then, peculiar turn of events, they expire that on March 11th. It's sunset. It's done, right? Which is what, a week and a half ago. So now, what does that mean? That means banks that are going to fail, they're going to be allowed to fail and go into FDIC receivership. It's like, why in the world would they want a bank to fail during an election year? Right. So it's either one of two things as I kind of think about it. Number one, they realize they truly have kind of run out of money. They can't continue to print with the emergence of the BRICS nations taking away the petrodollar. There's no built-in demand for our currency. So any funding that they might need that's not being paid for by our tax-paying dollars, they have to print it. And they know that if they keep printing, inflation goes up, they have to keep raising rates, and that's detrimental to the economy. So either they realize they're there and they just can't simply do it, or B, they want the banks to fail. It's like, Kirk, why would they want the banks to fail? Well, because they have a different agenda. They have a central bank digital currency that takes away our ability to buy and sell with whom we want to, where we want to, when we want to, and for what, right? So that's all about people control. I don't care if you're an ultra leftist or an ultra right person, nobody would want the ability to buy or sell taken away from them. Nobody wants spyware put on their bank account. And, let's look at it this way. If Trump were the president right now, the left would be saying, I don't want him telling me what I can buy or sell. And just like people on the right are saying, I don't want Biden telling me what we can buy or sell. Doesn't matter what political persuasion you are, right? Nobody's going to want that. So therefore, if nobody wants it, how are they going to get us to adapt it peacefully and actually want it? Well, you create a crisis that's so bad, banks failing, can't feed your kids, you can't pay your mortgage, you can't pay your rent, you can't pay your utilities, just exhaust people with bad stuff. And then they'll say, please, government, fix it. Please fix it. And they'll say, yeah, we have a solution. It's called central bank digital currency. Here you go. It's not going to fix anything. But what did they just do? They want to instill something that's going to put complete people control on you. And then the government is acting like God in the sense of they want to be our protector and they want to be our provider. That's what God is in our lives. Well, they want that. So how do you make that happen? You cut off private capital, you cut off the banking system. So people just simply do an end run around banks and go directly to the government for their survival and money, right? So this is what I think that they want. Now, back in January of 23, before the bank crisis even started happening, I was looking back earlier this week and I saw, man, I was talking about FDIC in January of 2023 only having 1.7% of all deposits covered. Right. And I talked about that on numerous shows, but I was talking to David and Stacey Whited at Flyover Conservatives. And it's like, we did that show back in January of 23. So then
basically
what happened?
Meaning, is that, let's just say that there's $1 trillion that people have sitting in the bank. Everyone thinks that, they go to their local bank and it says FDIC insured. Everyone's seen that plaque and you think, okay, well, up to $250,000 I'm insured. But if the whole system goes down, the FDIC would have to have $1 trillion, in simpleton math to insure everything. So what you're saying is that back in January of 23, of all of the money sitting in the banking system that they were supposed to be insuring, they only had enough funds to actually pay out on 1.4%. Is that
1.7%?
1.7%? Okay.
Yeah. So imagine this. If one bank failed, okay, you start to whittle away at that 1.7%. If two banks fail, you keep whittling away at it. So I got to thinking, what actually happened here? We had 5 banks that failed: Silicon Valley, Signature Bank, Credit Suisse, First Republic, and Silvergate Bank, right? 5. So then what happened between March of last year when that happened and March of this year? Well, I looked. You go to the FDIC, you can look at their balance sheet, you see what their assets are. They now only have 0.74% covering all deposits, savings accounts, checking accounts, CDs in America. It's like, what? 0.74%. So those 5 bank failures whittled away more than half of their assets in 1 year. So now, if we go into bank failure mode, because they just stopped the emergency funding provision, so now banks aren't going to get that to avoid FDIC receivership. They're going to go into FDIC receivership if they start to fail. That's going to whittle away the money. Now, I was reading some articles on Yahoo Finance. There was a CEO of a big real estate company. And I'm assuming probably some commercial real estate, like building subdivisions, some big dog to be able to speak on at this level. He warns that 500 or more banks are going to fail or be consolidated over the next 2 years. 500. Okay. Let's just say that he's the dumbest guy on the planet when it comes to this stuff. And only 10 banks fail, not 500. He's like so far off. Well, that's still double the amount that failed last spring. I think FDIC could go under, especially if it's 500 banks, FDIC goes out of business. But let's not take his word for it because he's just a CEO of a real estate company. Let's go to the banker of all bankers, supposedly the smartest banker in the world. Let's go to Jerome Powell, chairman of the Federal Reserve, right? So what did he say this week? He said there will be bank failures caused by commercial real estate losses. It's like, wait a second. He's in charge of all the banks, right? And now he's saying, we're going to have bank failures. He's basically saying the system that they created is failing and it's going to fail. So he should be the biggest cheerleader for his system. And he said, well, commercial real estate is going to cause banks to go under. So therefore, you've got this real estate guy, the banker of all bankers, both all saying banks are going to fail. We took away more than half of FDIC's assets with the 5 regional banks that failed last year. This one is going to be bigger than that. It's going to be way more than that. And I think this is why this is the biggest story of the year is bank failures are probably going to cause FDIC to go bankrupt. Well, now what? If you saw a bank that was failing and it hit the news, it's like Bank X is going out of business. What are you going to do what's it going to do to your brain? You're going to think, oh, my word, if that bank failed, what about my bank? I wonder if the money's safe in my bank. And this is why you start to have bank runs, is because everyone gets squirrely. They don't want their money to go away. They don't know how big the contagion is. And you start to get a run on banks. And it's like that scene on It's a Wonderful Life, right? Where they go in there and it's like, sorry, we don't have any money. It's like, what? What do you mean you don't have any money? Well, we don't have any money. We were investing your money into everything that you're investing in and it's gone, right? We're just hoping and praying that not everybody wants their money out at the same time. That's the nature of fractional reserve banking, is they only have to keep a certain amount on hand. And during COVID, that amount was zero. Of course, you're going to have bank failures if it's zero. So then just recently with Basel III, the international banking accord that they signed, they're bumping that up to 20%. So it's like, okay, this will stop bank failures. It's like, will it? Will it? So they moved it to 20%. Let's just say you were a $1 billion bank, Seth. You're the president of a $1 billion bank, and you were used to having 0% on hand, and now you have to come up with 200 million, because 20% of $1 billion is 200 million. Where's that money going to come from? It's not growing on trees, right? So you have to somehow come up with 200 million. If you can't, you either fail, go into FDIC receivership because you're out of compliance, or you get bought out by a bigger bank. So this is what's going to start happening, is because of these mechanisms that are supposed to help banks stay afloat, they're going to kill banks. But I think this is by design, right? So at a conference, I think it was last year, I was talking to RFK Jr. And, the guy, his family is embroiled in controversy and conspiracy theories since the beginning of time. His uncle and his dad, being mysteriously killed. And it's like, so he understands conspiracies. And he said, Kurt, what we're seeing in America right now is no longer a conspiracy theory. It's just a conspiracy against us. So I'm telling you, the theories of yesterday are the realities of today. When these things are spoken about, they're not hiding in the shadows. They're telling us they want to usher in central bank digital currency that has the ability to cut you off from buying or selling. They're telling us all of this. It's not a conspiracy theory. They're in plain sight telling us what's going to happen. But again, nobody would want that unless the crisis is so bad that they're willing to give up their freedoms, right? So this is where we're headed. And then yesterday, I'm watching Jerome Powell, give his FOMC, speech. And what did they do? They decided to pause interest rates again. No shocker to me, even though 6 months ago they said, we're going to lower interest rates like 6 times in 2024. because we've won the war against inflation and we can lower rates now because we've done our job. I told people back then that's not going to happen. They haven't won the war on inflation at all, right? So therefore, you can't lower interest rates if inflation is still persisting or inflation gets worse. So what are they doing? They're not raising interest rates because they know that would actually kill the economy. They're not lowering because that would make inflation more. So they're just putting it on pause. It's like, we don't know what to do at this point. Let's just pause. So now the message is changing from we're going to have 6 interest rate reductions this year to then he said maybe 2 or 3. And then they left it on the table. But, and this is a big but, core inflation is persisting. It's getting a lot. And we would be open to, possibly not having any interest rate reductions this year at all. It's like, okay, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to fix it, is what all of this tells me, which is why he's saying banks are going to fail, right? And you look at this and it's like, this is complete madness, because the system that they created is now like the dinosaurs on Jurassic Park. You create this beast, this monster for everybody to look at and go to the park and enjoy it. It's like, wow, look at these dinosaurs. And then the dinosaurs decide to escape and they start destroying their creator. This is what they've done with inflation. They can't fix the beast of their own creation. They can't fix it. It's gotten too big. It's gotten too bad. It's gotten too ugly. And it permeates every part of our lives. And now you probably just let the system fail so you can usher in something new. And that something new is all about people control. Sadly, that's how I view the economy headed this year.
And it's crazy because just to put together a simple timeline, right? Was you and I have been talking about the banking system for quite some time now. So
Yeah.
the bank failures of last year, you had 5 banks. I think those banks were close to half a trillion dollars, if I remember correctly, in assets, like 500 billion or something. I think it was that. Wait, let me see. I had it here right in front of me. So the 4 regional banks, including Silicon Valley Bank, had $532 billion in assets.
Yeah.
So basically, we had these banks failed last year. They put in this emergency, safeguard. This kind of, okay, the dam is leaking. Shove something in the biggest hole and hope it holds out. But there's a 1-year time limit roughly on that safeguard, which just came off. Okay, so but those 4 banks, just those 4 banks alone, took over half of the FDIC reserves, right, to bail out these banks, or not really bail out the banks, but actually to insure the funders. So I put up a picture earlier. This is Silicon Valley Bank. These are people waiting outside the bank as it's failing, hoping they can get their life savings. So when you and I have conversation and we talk about, sorry. So when you and I have these conversations and we talk about what happens when there's a bank failure, it's like, this is what it looks like. If I mean, you can't really see closely, but you zoom in on these different people. Like, these are people, they might have $500,000, they might have $10,000, whatever it is. They might have their life savings, they might have their business account, whatever it is, at that account and within Silicon Valley Bank, and they're sitting there. I can't imagine the stress that they're experiencing, hoping that they can walk into that account and walk away with a check that represents the money they had in that account. I mean, it's similar to the scene from It's a Wonderful Life when everyone goes in all at once and there's that big, kind of big ruckus, and they're just like, they're all screaming like, I want my money out. And he's like, I can't pay you all. So you have basically with where the situation is at now, it's like, okay, so we had the emergency funding put in place that just got pulled out. In the meantime, as you mentioned, they're now saying, okay, hey, you got to have 20%, not 0%. Okay. At the same time, you've got the regional banks that are being warned about. Like, so these smaller banks, you got Powell coming out, you have significant people, this real estate CEO, even Powell himself coming out admitting that this is coming. And you don't have Powell coming out, you don't have Yellen coming out and saying, hey, folks, just so you know, we know that you trust the FDIC, but actually, the FDIC can only cover less than 1% of all deposits. I
Yeah.
mean, to me, it's like that dam that they are trying so hard, or maybe they're not trying. Maybe they're intentionally like building it up so the whole thing collapses because it's an election year. I mean, that's something that. I mean, what do you think about that idea that as we head into what I think is the most important election in the history of this country in terms of determining whether in 4 years or 3 years we're a communist country or the free United States of America. I mean, the timing of all this is just insane. I mean, it just it's baffling. It's all kind of compounding, and it's teetering on this edge.
It is. And so it's not just here that we're having an election year. It's like 60% of the world is having an election this year. So what do people vote on when they go to the ballots? What do? They're voting to change the government, right? That's what all elections are about. They want to change the government. So this year is no different. Are we going to change, or are we going to stay down this fateful path on the road to serfdom, right? I think that we'll see, right? But I think most of America is starting to wake up to the fact of the government overreach. And this is why the battle against Trump, for example, is so extreme. Even Christine Lagarde in Europe is saying, boy, if Trump wins, dude, this is going to be really bad for the globalist movement. It's like, sweet. See, they know it. They know that people are waking up and this populist movement is waking up, and the government overreach by these globalists has gotten so extreme. There's almost like it's exposed, right? And so the manipulation is exposed, the lies have been exposed. And here's what I love about that. Just like anything in life, um, if something is hidden, it can control you. So let's just say you're a politician, you have skeletons in the closet, right? So that can always be used against you. Another politician is going to say, "Hey, I'm going to expose the skeletons in your closet unless you vote my way," right? And so you get that, um, or like, if you're a Christian or whatever, and it's like, okay, you've got this hidden sin, right? It's like, okay, once it's exposed, the one who's trying to control you no longer has power, right? If things are out in the open, there's no power. If the politician were to just go out and say, "These are all my skeletons in my closet," that can never be used against him. It's out there in the open. And once you confess your sins, for example, well then in the Christian world, that okay, the devil no longer has a grip on you because it's all up in the open. So this is what I think is happening in the political world, is all of these things that have been hidden for years, they're all becoming, truth is being exposed, the lies are being exposed, truth is overriding that, light is casting out the darkness, people are waking up to the fact of what's been happening. And this is why I think why the battle is so intense right now, because the battle is no longer in the desert. The invading army is right at the gates of the city, ready to overtake it, right? And that's why this battle is so extreme, and why it's exciting to me, because truth is going to win. I fully believe that. Fully believe that light is casting out the darkness. I'm not saying it's going to be an easy road to get there, right? But I think that we're getting there. And you look at everything, the price manipulation in silver over the decades, it's now being exposed, and you're seeing massive movements in the price of gold and silver. You're seeing things being exposed politically and economically. The FDIC underinsured, and people realize I have to run for safety. Maybe I'm just going to get my money out of the bank. Well, that's what you should do, right? That would be a partial solution, not a full solution. Partial solution: get your money out of the bank. Second part of the solution, I would allocate into tangible assets like silver, because still staying in cash, well, how do you get your assets out of the bank? What are you going to do with it? Right? So you have to do something with it. I wouldn't put it in the stock market. I wouldn't put it in the bond market right now. They're overvalued, because the stock market's a function of revenue. People don't have money right now. They're not spending. Unemployment's going up. This is another lie that's being exposed from the Biden administration is they said earlier in the week 275,000 jobs were created. Created. Okay, this is great, right? But then they said, but and unemployment went up to 3.9%. It's like, wait a second. How do you create 275,000 jobs and unemployment goes up? Shouldn't that be the opposite? I mean, but something's wrong with that math, right? But or is it? No, there's nothing wrong with the math. There's wrong with the how they speak it and the messaging. Because in America, the way that they measure unemployment is if you've been looking for a job for so long that you got so discouraged and you stopped looking because nobody's hiring you, they take you out of the pool. They take you out. They don't even measure you anymore. It's as if they now consider you employed because you voluntarily stopped looking for work. Does that mean you're employed? No, it means you're still unemployed. You just gave up, right? So that's how what we're seeing is those people are not working. They don't count them anymore. You add those to the number of people in unemployment, and everything that they're saying is multiplicatively worse than what they're saying. And so this is the economy that we're living in. And I like it that the more lies that they say, the more people distrust what they're saying because their wallets are telling them this can't be true. It's not my reality. And that's where we're headed now in this election year. And hopefully people see the truth as it starts to cast out the lies.
So one question I do have for you is because I agree with you in terms of trying to pull assets out of the banking system, but I'm sure you have a bank account. I have a bank account. I have a savings account. So, because for a lot of us, maybe you pay your mortgage through your bank. Maybe you have to, your paycheck every month from your employer comes into a bank account. So, we have to still have bank accounts. So obviously, whatever assets you can comfortably pull out and put into, whether it's cash under the pillow, hey, that's a great step. The next step is going to be assets that aren't going to be tied to any particular fiat currency like the dollar, right? Which is, tangible assets like gold, silver, ammunition, food, water,
Yeah.
Land, etc. But I see one question I do see that people ask a lot, which I think would be very useful to get your advice on this is what kind of bank would you recommend people using, right? So
Yeah.
would you say, hey, go for one of the really big banks like, say Bank of America or Chase? Would you go for a small local bank, a medium-sized bank, or say a credit union? Because if we have to have money within the banking system for just interacting in society, what is the least bad option of those particular options in your opinion?
So good question. I wouldn't do the big banks, the big five, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citi, Wells Fargo. I mean, they have so much derivatives debt. They've got tens of trillions of dollars each of derivatives debt exposure. That's not safe. I also wouldn't do a small little local one-off bank because I don't think they have enough capital to withstand a storm. Now, we're seeing regional bank failures, but all those regional bank failures that we're seeing are like coastal regional banks or maybe commercial real estate, residential real estate is causing them to hit the skids. So overall, I think credit unions are the safest. It's kind of a dangerous comment to make because I haven't looked at the books of every single credit union, right? None of them really, but the way that they're owned is they're owned by the members. So they're going to be a little bit more conservative in their approach, or else they'd have a mutiny on their hand if something went wrong because of the way that they're owned. And I think regional banks in the Midwest are probably pretty okay because they don't have the extremes in real estate valuations that you've seen on the coasts, right? So really, credit unions or medium-sized regional banks, but really in the flyover states, right? In the center of the country. Overall, I would say that's probably good. Now, my CEO, Ashley, and I have this conversation every single day because we're a big company. We're getting millions of dollars a day coming in bank wires for people buying gold and silver. Right? So what do? Do we have that all in one bank? We can't. So we're finding regional banks here in Colorado and basically spreading it out between a bunch of different banks. I would encourage everybody to do the same. If you've got more than the FDIC limit in your banks, open up a second one, open up a third one. go to a credit union, do what you need to do, but don't have too much in cash. Now, we can't eliminate all cash. You just can't, because we live in a cash world. We have to have an emergency fund. We have expenses. We have to live, right? But having too little in cash affects your peace of mind. Having too much in cash is counterproductive because you're not keeping up with inflation. But maybe 3 to 6 months of expenses in cash is good enough. And then I would allocate the rest into something that's strong, like silver, that's actually growing and thriving and takes advantage of the markets. It maintains your freedom, your privacy, because you're getting it out of that system into something that's tangible and real. So everybody's different, though. That's why we do free consultations, so we can hear your needs, your fears, your goals, and map out a strategy for success moving forward, using precious metals as a hedge against your banking assets and other assets that you might have.
That makes sense. So one thing I will say, and just as we kind of wrap up here, you and I have talked a lot about Weiss ratings. I'll put this link in the description. This is a great place. I've even looked when I've been looking for banks. This is a great place of telling you the health of the bank. Obviously, it says yes, J.P. Morgan is a B. Citibank is a B minus because they have so many assets, right? So that does give them some amount of stability. And they're not looking here at they're not analyzing how likely the bank is to impose globalist agendas, right? So let's just say for folks that are on here, let's just say you want to come on here and look for just whatever community bank, right? You type in your bank name and say you're in Longview, Texas, or say you're in Lexington, Tennessee, and there's a local community bank. Well, you can see it's a D plus. So you can find your bank on here. It shows you the total deposits, shows you the net income, the capital, the assets, return on assets. So it has a whole analysis on it. So this is something I would definitely recommend for people. This has been really helpful for me. If you're going to say, hey, is the local credit union safe? Well, you go find your local credit union. Say you're banking with the Union Fidelity Federal Credit Union in Houston, Texas. Looks pretty healthy, right? It's a B. So that's just something I would recommend. And then finally, if folks do want to move and reallocate into precious metals, we've got a link set up, Gold with Seth. You come onto here, takes you to the website with Kirk, who I trust infinitely, for a lot of different reasons. Little form here that folks can fill out to set up a free consultation, or they can give you a call, 720-605-3900. And I know that you guys can walk them through any and every question. It's free. Whether they say, hey, what about this one retirement account I have? How can I avoid taxes doing this? Should I store it at home? Should I store any question at all about, should I buy 10-ounce bars or 1-ounce, rounds? Whatever it is, I know that your specialists are an extension of your knowledge and they will help people. So all those links are going to be in the description. Kirk, thank you again. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. Any final closing comments for people as we sign off?
No, just don't operate out of fear, right? Just operate out of wisdom, sound mind. This makes sense, right? Don't fear will cause you to make a wrong decision, to put your head in the sand and do nothing. But listen to what Seth and I were talking about today. That's just wisdom, right? It's wisdom to get out of something that's coming down as soon as you can, get into something that's going up as soon as you can. That's how you can maximize your return while minimizing your risk. So just take that leap of faith and give us a call and we'll walk you through it. And either you can say, yeah, that makes sense, or no, I don't want to do it. It's fine. Our goal is to help you come to a decision, whatever it is, to help you protect and preserve and start to minimize that financial anxiety that you have.
Perfect. Kirk, thank you again. I'll see you next week.
My pleasure.